velocità passiamo a Claudia Gregori e a Giuseppe Loffreda della Legans su un tema abbastanza interessante, shipping and private equity e le strutture di investimento che si possono realizzare, che rappresenta un'altra forma importante che ricordo le KG, potrebbero essere forme alternative di finanziamento. Abbiamo solo 5 minuti.
Okay, I will try to be very brief. Thank you to everybody. Just to say that the reason why talking about private equity in a session dedicated to shipping financing, we believe that with Francesco this was a good idea, simply because we know that the shipping sector, as opposed to other sectors, has not been traditionally very much involved by private equity structures. I don't think it's worth investigating why, but we do think that in the last few years, in the very recent years, shipping has become a very interesting sector for private equity. And this is mainly due to two different reasons. First of all, the financial crisis, which rendered for ship owners and for shipping companies very much harder to raise debt financing. And secondly, I think that the shipping sector also became very interesting for private equity funds, which turned their attention on such sector because of several factors. Just to give you the main one, first of all, the shipping sector is an international market, but at the very same time, it's asset-based. And secondly, also due to the reduction in the price of the assets, it's possible to have good deals for a private equity fund, and which means, in particular, the possibility to obtain interesting return, the very famous IRR, internal rate of return. I apologize for my pronunciation. Lastly, the possibility, also due to the several kind of assets involved, to obtain a substantial portfolio diversification, which is very important for a private equity fund. Structuring a private equity deal in the shipping sector entails certain complexities, and there are certain factors which may have an influence. First one is whether the deal is made by the private equity fund on a standalone basis, or instead whether a ship owner, a shipping company, is involved as an industrial partner. Because of course, if a shipping company is involved, here you may see a quite typical private equity structure. Of course, the assets need to be isolated into an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, and ad hoc company, in order to ring-fence also the risk. The second element, which is very important, so of course then the other elements to consider is the legal nature of the SPV, the jurisdiction of incorporation, which may well be influenced by the cost of the register, tonnage tax system, social security incentives. The second element, and I think this is also crucial, is the kind of risk that the private equity fund is willing to take in the deal. Because it may be either a purely financial investment, or instead the private equity fund may also be willing to participate and to take a share in the market and industrial risk. And in such a case, of course, this may have an impact on the kind of instruments to which the private equity fund will participate to the deal. Because, of course, taking a market risk will be more likely see the investments to pure equity instruments like shares or quasi-equity instruments like in Italy we have the so-called strumenti finanziari partecipativi, which allow a great degree of flexibility also in structuring the type of return. Or instead, you may have in investments to debt instruments, which is more keen to the concept of mezzanine investment. Of course, the kind of risk has also an influence on the way in which the ship is employed. Investment on spot, utilization to spot cannot be so consistent with a private equity fund policy, which will be more willing to have a bareboat agreement, which of course stabilizes return, or time charter agreements. Also, the investment in a pool can be a suitable investment for a private equity fund. All these things need to be inserted and then in legal documentation. And the main legal documentation would be investment agreement and shareholders agreement, which needs to govern the governance of the SPV, employment of the vessel, and also the exit strategy, which you know is very important for a private equity fund. Here is the place where the traditional concept of private equity, like exit, ERR, tag along, drag along, need to be inserted, and sometimes may clash with the concept, traditional shipping concept, and this is part of the job that must be made, first of all, by the principal, and secondly, also by the private equity fund, to try, and also by legal advisors, to try to render traditional concept of private equity being adapted to the policy of the shipping sector and the concept of the shipping sectors. I think this was just to give you an highlight of what can be done, but I think the message is that private equity can be a suitable source to obtain alternative financing, also for ship owner and the shipping sector, in a time which, as we have heard before, is very difficult for us. And so finding alternative ways of financing can be good for the shipping industry, generally speaking. I leave a moment to my colleague Giuseppe Loffreda, who will give you an highlight of which are the concept of shipping that needs to be consistent with a private equity investment.
Thank you, Claudia. I don't even move from my seat, so to be very, very quickly and to save time, as Francesco needs time at this point. Just very briefly, I was supposed to explain which are the push shipping aspects which are involved in a private equity investment. Just to summarize, of course, as Claudia explained, the isolation of the ship in a special purpose vehicle is generally needed to ring-fence the asset and the related financial flows. This means that the main shipping aspects involved in a private equity investment are the acquisition of the assets, of course, on the new building market or on the resale market, so with all the relevant typical contractual documentation which are involved, so the building contract, either the building contract or the entering into an MOA and then the sale and purchase of the vessel. And of course, once the asset is acquired, you have to either operate directly, which is not very frequent case, or otherwise to charter the vessel either by a bareboat charter agreement or in time charter. In the latter case, of course, the special purpose vehicle will need to crew and equip the vessel. In both cases, the special purpose vehicle would entrust the third parties with the technical management of the ship, so as to guarantee the perfect and professional maintenance of the asset, for the entire duration of the investment, also for the purpose of preventing the highest possible value of the asset in the relevant period. Of course, all these aspects and the contractual obligation and agreements needs an assistant under a legal standpoint, and also due to the fact that most of these agreements are regulated by English law. As lawyers, we frequently have to manage and to deal with English colleagues. That's it for my paper.